All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mike Mina, and I'm going to be your host today. I want to welcome everyone to the launch of our exciting new free weekly webinar series, The Lunch Break. This series is going to be held, as you know, every Thursday afternoon at 2 p.m. Pacific time, starting today, March 7th, and we're going to run through May 30th. So in total, we're going to be covering 13 topics that we know are at the forefront of many discussions, specifically related to California. If you are joining us, by the way, from another state, feel free to stay and learn more about these topics as well if you'd like. We hope that you can join us every week, obviously, but if you're unable to attend, we will talk about at the end of the discussion today on how you can actually access the recordings at the conclusion of our call. So real quick for everybody, what is LunchAssist? School nutrition directors, we know you guys are some of the busiest people I've met, and there's only so much time in the day. The LunchAssist Pro membership, it saves you time, it increases your capacity by offering, on-demand training, curated resources, and a professional standards tracking tool all in one place. All of this is really designed with the intention to help you build a stronger nutrition department without the stress. We also offer one-on-one consulting services to our California districts with our team of school nutrition experts, most of whom are former auditors. Many of you know Jen, our founder. She was a school nutrition director there in California as well. She founded LunchAssist really because it was something that she really wished she had coming up as a director, not necessarily just a new director, but just as a great resource. And now we're really lucky to work with probably around 35% of the school districts in California. And we do that to help you stay compliant, have more time to focus on feeding kids, and obviously we want you to pass your administrative reviews. Speaking of the 35% of the districts in California, we want to give a special shout out and thank you to all of our LunchAssist Pro members and consulting customers that are joining us on the call today. Without all of you guys supporting our business, we wouldn't be able to offer the free webinar series that we're doing, as well as other resources that we provide to everybody. For anyone who's not a member, I will be talking to you later on at the conclusion of the call today on how you can join. Now I want to do a real quick intro for our team. I'm going to start again with myself. My name is Mike Muna. I am the Director of Sales here at LunchAssist. I'm based out of New Orleans, Louisiana, if you can't tell by my accent. I have been in the school nutrition industry now since 2004. My family actually owned a school nutrition software company called MCS, which we sold to Heartland back in, I want to say it was like 2013. I joined LunchAssist in September 2022, and I couldn't be happier to be here. It's just been a great experience to learn from everybody here, so I'm excited. Next, I want to introduce Emma Finn, who will be our interviewer today. Some of you may know Emma from her time at Friends of the Earth. She's returned to the world of school nutrition now as our communication and training coordinator. We also have with us Catherine Kartnitz, helping out on Zoom controls today. And then lastly, the guest of honor, I would like to introduce you to our founder and today's expert, Jen McNeil. Also want to give a quick shout out to our entire LunchAssist team that's listening on the phone call today. You guys, without your support, helping out the customers, we, wouldn't be here as well doing what we're doing today. I really quickly want to cover the Q&A instructions here. Please put any questions that you might have in the chat. We'll attempt to answer those questions as we go during the discussion, but all the questions we're going to gather up, and they're going to be answered during the end of the call at our Q&A session today. Today's topic is something we know that is quote unquote fresh on everyone's mind, which is freshly prepared meals. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Emma.
Thanks, Mike. Hi, everyone. So that was a great intro. Today, Jen and I are going to take a deep dive into the California Kitchen Infrastructure and Training Funds, or KIT funds. And in particular, we're going to be talking about an area of the 2022 KIT funds that have been a bit tricky to understand, freshly prepared meals. But before we get into freshly prepared meals, Jen, can you tell us a little bit, what are KIT funds?
Yeah, thanks, Emma. And hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, so happy to be here. So, yeah, what are kit funds? So, first of all, that's a great question. Let's just start with the basics. So, kit funds, like you said, kitchen infrastructure and training funds. So, this is like we're super lucky to have this in our state. It's a California specific funding stream. It's been about $750 million total that's been allocated by the state government to support, really to support the implementation of universal meals. And knowing that we need better equipment, better infrastructure, and more training to be able to do that. So there's been two different rounds, and the 2021 funds, 2022 funds, those are people opted into them, and the majority of the school districts in California received some funding from this stream, which is really cool.
Yeah, no, that's actually pretty amazing. So with the kit funds here, how do freshly prepared on-site meals come into play?
Yeah, yeah. What's fresh on our mind, right, is like the freshly prepared meals and how we're supposed to comply with that. So, freshly prepared on-site meals. Um, well, before I explain what that is, I'll just tell you. So, 2021 funds was equipment and training, right? Equipment, infrastructure, and training. But then the 2022 funds had that same provision of the base allocation for the equipment and infrastructure and training. So anyone who opted into 2021 funds and 2022 funds got, equipment, infrastructure, training, funding. And then the 2022 funds had kind of like an extra layer to it that some schools opted into, which was um, same allowable uses, right? The funding can be used on equipment, infrastructure, training, and increasing capacity for scratch cooking, but it's like essentially an extra amount of money that was given to schools who could attest that they would cook or prepare 40% of their meals from scratch during school year 23-24. So essentially, freshly prepared meals is all about it's tied to this funding stream that people opted into. And they opted into that by saying, yes, I'm going to do basically 40% scratch cooking this school year.
Okay, so 40% scratch cooking, that seems pretty broad. What exactly is a freshly prepared meal?
Yeah. Okay. So this is the question, right? So I know, we're friends with Dan at Brigade and we've kind of joked around like, how do you define scratch cooking? So the legislation doesn't actually say scratch cooking. Let's just be clear about that. It says freshly prepared on-site meals. And so it's a little bit funky, and that's what we're going to dig in today. Like, what is this? What does it mean? Because it's complicated and it's been an evolving definition. So I'm super excited to kind of dig into it. So initially, the purpose of this is to essentially serve fresh and nutritious school meals using minimally processed, locally grown, and sustainable food, or for expanding meal options for pupils with restricted diets. So that's like one of the main purposes. And then the freshly prepared on-site meals, the attestation was that no less than 40% of reimbursable school lunch and breakfast program meals, including the entree, prepared each week. So you can see this definition is getting, more complicated by the word, by the second. Beginning in the 23-24 school year shall be freshly prepared. So that's verbatim what's in the legislation, and that's what we're going to unpack. So it's essentially a really complicated legislation that CDE's been trying to simplify, and then we're trying to kind of break it down even further.
Right. Okay. So, minimally processed, locally grown, sustainable food. But, looking at a lunch tray, can you tell us how does a meal qualify?
Yeah, that's really what we want to do, right? Like we're, all lunch ladies here, and we are food people. We just want to say like, what food do we have to serve? So, um, really the way that CDE has given this definition out is they've said that either all items in the meal are minimally processed, which is actually not very common. So they've got these like two definitions, but all items in the meal being minimally processed, it's so rare that you would have that would mean you have to make everything from scratch, including your bread, cooking everything from raw. And it's just very rare that a school has every single item like even your crackers, your tortilla, every single thing made from a minimally processed. So I think that we yeah we um, we're gonna kind of skip over that one. The meal being cooked or prepared using both fresh, raw, whole ingredients and ready-made products. That's the more common definition that we are looking at. But it's still really abstract. So a meal
Right.
being cooked or prepared using fresh, raw, whole ingredients, it's kind of like, what does that mean?
Yeah, can you make a little more sense? I know you've been working on a little framework here, so if you could just give us the one, two, three, tell us real simple, what food would I serve?
Yes, yes. So that's what we've been trying to do for the last like several months. We've been working on a framework and really for more than a year now, and we're excited to release it. So um, this is kind of the overview of this framework at a glance. So this is our little one, two, three. How do we count something as freshly prepared? So the first thing we're going to do is look at number one, which is avoiding commercially prepared combination entrees. So
Mm.
essentially, if you're trying to think of like what I need to serve on my school lunch tray, the first thing we're going to do is like what not to serve, right? So what not to serve? No commercially prepared combination entrees. You're not going to be able to count like a frozen burrito or an uncrustable, no matter what you do to that meal. If it starts with a combination entree, um, it's not going to work like a frozen packaged entree.
Even if it's like you adding vegetables on top, right? So like this example, what about adding some fresh vegetables, from your local farm on top of a frozen pizza? That wouldn't count.
Right, right. So that's a great way to like get extra veggies into the kids. Like nothing wrong with adding extra veggies on top of anything, right? But unfortunately, that's not going to count as a freshly prepared meal.
All right. Okay, well, I also noticed on the list there's no packaged cheeseburgers. But what if I had a homemade bun and a frozen patty?
Perfect. Okay, so now we're getting into step two of the framework. So, step two, how we've broken this down is elevate the entree. So, one of the things you could do is to prepare this meal is to prepare the grain from scratch, or prepare the protein from scratch, or have an eighth cup of fruit or veggie. So, this is really the heart of this framework of how you can create a freshly prepared meal. So, like the example that you just said was to prepare the grain from scratch. So you've got your homemade bun, beautiful, and then you've got a pre-made patty, and that cheeseburger could count as a freshly prepared meal.
Okay. Um, I was speaking a little too soon. What if I don't have baking capacity and I can't do the bun?
Right. I mean, there's a reason why people did a lot of baking during COVID, right? Because they had too much time on their hands. Um, it's really time consuming to bake bread from scratch. So if you can't bake the bread from scratch, that's totally fine. You can still get your hamburger to count by using a 100% beef patty cooked from raw. So preparing the protein from scratch.
Mm.
Or let's say it's not a meat burger, it's a veggie burger. You can make your veggie burger from scratch and use a commercially prepared bun. That would work as well.
And let's say I don't have that much cooking capacity in the kitchen. What if I can't do either? What if I can't do the bun and I can't do the patty?
Yeah, so again, that is definitely something that is, a lot of people also don't have like the food safety training, and like there's a lot of reasons why people want to serve like just a clean label 100% beef pre-cooked patty, right? So you could do that. You could do a pre-made bun, a pre-made patty, assemble that burger. But you still need to do something within step two of the framework, which is elevate the entree. So what you could do instead is add an eighth cup of fruit or veggie. So you could do like lettuce and tomato. You want to go tropical with it, you could add a little bit of pineapple to that burger. Pineapple rings, anyone?
Nice. No, that's a great kind of hack here. But not everyone has burgers. So what are some other examples of meals that I could serve?
Yeah, so following this framework, so elevate the entree, when we're looking at grains from scratch, what does that look like? So anything that you're doing with like rice cooked from dry, no matter what you kind of combine with that in your entree, the rice from dry will be your grain from scratch. So that'll meet this part of the framework. Pasta from dry, same thing. So if you cook your pasta noodles from dry noodles, then you could add like a prepared sauce with that. Homemade bread and tortillas we talked about might be a bit labor intensive. Homemade pizza dough. They've also given an allowance for like cooking the dough from like frozen dough. So pizza dough balls, you could bake those off. You don't necessarily have to make the dough, but if you cook it off, then that would count as like homemade pizza dough.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
All right. So
And
that sounds pretty straightforward, especially the rice and pasta. Well, what about the protein category?
yeah, so just kind of digging more into the like entree categories and like with your proteins from scratch. So when you're looking at proteins from scratch, the meats, poultry, fish, pork, beef, anything like that, those would need to be from raw to be considered like protein from scratch, or fresh raw whole ingredient. So of course, that has food safety kind of considerations. Not everyone's set up for that, which is totally fine. But then beans, beans could be canned or dry. So this is where the guidance from CD has been really nuanced, which is why we came up with this framework because we were struggling to kind of logically put everything together. So beans, if you just add beans, even if they're canned, it still counts as a fresh raw whole ingredient.
Mhm.
Or you could cook them from dry, and then you could use tofu, tempeh, yogurt, any of those items, eggs.
Yeah, okay. Well, I noticed that, you've got meat, you've got beans, and you've even got some dairy, actually. You've got some yogurt in there, but, big category in the protein section would be cheese. And I'm wondering, why isn't cheese included on that list?
Yeah, okay, so that's a great question. So cheese has been a little bit of my hill to die on, and I've asked a million questions of cheese about cheese to CDE. So um, I've come up with the basically conclusion that cheese is a shapeshifter.
Mm.
And so just go with me here. So I don't know if any of you have watched Encanto with your kids. I've been watching that with my daughter, and Camilo is one of the characters, and he's a shapeshifter. And cheese is a shapeshifter according to CDE because sometimes it's a ready-made product and sometimes it's a fresh raw whole ingredient, and it depends on the
Right.
context. So yeah, essentially what they've said is that like if you serve cheese with other ready-made products, so like you just add cheese to bread or you add cheese on top of, a pre-made bun and a pre-made patty, it's not going to count as minimally processed. But if you serve it on its own, it counts as a minimally processed fresh raw whole ingredient.
Okay. So it wouldn't count if I just had it straight on the bread, but if I had the pre-made patty, the pre-made bun, the fresh lettuce and tomato, and the cheese, I'd be fine.
Exactly. Yeah. Or like one of the examples that I actually was really frustrated about was like a grilled cheese sandwich. I'm a big grilled cheese fan and a quesadilla fan, right? Quesadillas, grilled cheeses, even if you're making them in your kitchen, they're not going to count as freshly prepared unless you made the bread or tortilla from scratch, or if you add an 8 cup of fruit or veg, or maybe add some salsa to it.
Okay. Yeah. And actually that kind of brings up another question I have, which is what other shapeshifters are there?
Okay, thanks for bearing with me on this shapeshifters. This is so random, but I think it's a good way to think about it. So cheese is the main one, and then bread and tortillas are another one that are kind of like they straddle two sides. And in some ways I feel like this is like learning a foreign language. Like you sort of just have to accept certain rules. Like, if you've ever conjugated verbs in a foreign language, you're like, okay, I'm just gonna I'm just gonna accept that that's how that works. So I think bread and tortillas, and cheese are kind of like this. So bread and tortillas, again, if you combine them with other ready-made products, just like our cheeseburger example, just like our grilled cheese example, they're not going to just automatically make the meal freshly prepared. But if you serve them on their own, like a dinner roll on the side is okay. So it's it sort of like depends on how you fit those into your meal.
Right. Yeah, and that actually brings up also what about product placement, right? Like, do the fruits and vegetables have to be a part of the entree, or could they be offered on the salad bar to count, even that eighth cup fruit or veggie?
Exactly. So product placement is very, very important in the freshly prepared guidance from CDE. So I don't want to like, um, I want to make sure everyone remembers that because, um, yeah, product placement is super important. So you're gonna want to basically, especially thinking about fruits and veggies, let's say you're adding homemade salsa or ch tomato and lettuce or salad bar to elevate your entree. You need to be cognizant of how you're placing that. So it needs to be either with the entree, or if it's on the side, let's say it's on your salad bar, you need to have signage that shows the kids like your cheeseburger, make it freshly prepared with lettuce and tomato from the salad bar.
Hmm.
And please keep in mind, we didn't make up these rules. We're just like kind of trying to streamline it and like be the messengers here. But that's really what they want is like the education around it so that the students know what the freshly prepared item is. And another way to think about it is like, how is it on your menus? How is it in your recipes? How is it like messaged to students? That's really where it's good they're providing this flexibility, right? And so then it's just for on like, all of us who are doing menu planning to be aware of how we can navigate that. So product placement is super important. So the freshly prepared item needs to be either like paired together or clearly messaged to match up next to each other. Yeah.
And just to reiterate, I mean, so you can't have a pre-made frozen burrito and have salsa on it, but you could have a pre-made a tortilla and some like a frozen fajita, chicken fajita prepared, and then you could have the salsa. So it has to be combined, even though that the grain might be prepackaged and the protein is prepackaged, if you add that eighth cup of fruit and veggie, that does count. And you have to also combine those two elements in order to make it count. So I also noticed that there's a lot of folks in the chat that are very confused as to why you can't add an eighth cup of fruit or veggie to a pizza, but you could have the pre-made dough, the pre-made sauce, and those, and then add the veggies, and that would count. And so I just kind of want to reiterate for folks that you're combining the grain and the protein, which is why it counts, as opposed to a combined pre-made product. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's about kind of preparing. So I think if we're trying to make sense of why like adding veggies on top of frozen pizza isn't going to count, I think I would think about it as like preparing. We're trying to prepare the meals.
Hmm.
And also don't get too caught up on trying to make sense out of it. I think it's kind of one of those things that we just have to sort of like, that's why we created a framework because there's not a super clear through line on all of this logically. And that's what I've struggled with for like the last 8 months, trying
Yeah.
to come up with a
Yeah.
framework in the first place. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've given me the first two steps. What's step three?
Yes, so step three is super important. And I really want to make sure everyone knows this because I don't think very many people have noticed this actually. It's all about sides. So your sides, you need to make your sides minimally processed. So most of us have fruit, veg, milk, juice, on our sides. Like we talked about, cheese, dinner rolls, tortillas, those are considered minimally processed when they're served on the side. However, the packaged cookies, crackers, brownies, tortillas, or Doritos, that kind of stuff, that is going to be something that would potentially disqualify your meal.
Interesting. Okay, so even if I had this beautifully prepared lentil burger on a homemade bun, it would totally disqualify if I had some packaged brownies for a celebration meal. Or, what about graham crackers? I mean, that's pretty common.
Yeah, same thing, graham crackers. And we noticed this like in the guidance from CDE and we were kind of like, okay, let's dig into it. And we emailed them. So we have this actually, we just got further clarification on this yesterday. So And we'll share all of what you're seeing on the screen with you in on the call, so you guys can reference it later. But basically, we had a client who emailed us and they were like, "We're making homemade waffles. Does this count as freshly prepared?" And we are like, "Oh yeah, homemade waffles for sure, that counts." And then we looked at their menu. We were like, "Oh, but you have graham crackers. Like, there's guidance that says that graham crackers and packaged side items will disqualify your meal." But we wanted to clarify that, and this is correct. The homemade waffles are great if they're served by themselves, but let's say you needed an extra 1 ounce of grain, so you added some graham crackers to meet your grain minimums, that would sort of disqualify the meal.
That's okay.
Yeah, and then we were kind of joking on our consulting team just to kind of be like, okay, but what if we sprinkled the graham crackers on top of the waffle? Because then we're combining a product that's made from scratch with a ready-made product. And they said technically, yes, that's fine.
What?
So it's all, and that's where we were saying member product placement. So
Right.
obviously, we don't recommend sprinkling graham crackers on top of waffles. That was really legitimately a joke. But it's just kind of an example of how that product placement piece is really important, right? And also, just to reiterate that, yes, like a packaged processed type side item could disqualify your whole meal, even if you have this beautiful scratch made meal.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what about let's say a homemade cookie, a homemade brownie, a homemade graham cracker?
Yeah, yeah, those would be fine. Those would be fine. So if you're making that item, using flour and eggs or
Right.
even a frozen puck, like frozen cookie dough that you're baking off,
Okay.
that's fine. But it's more about those like individually processed items.
Okay. Yeah. So you gave me the 1, 2, 3. Let's see. Avoid commercially prepared combination entrees at all cost. Number 2, you can elevate the entree by adding an 1/8 cup fruit or veggie, or by prepping the grain or protein from scratch. And then the third one seems pretty critical, which is to make those sides minimally processed. Otherwise, you could totally disqualify your meal. Okay. So
Yeah.
here's the framework. Now, how do I calculate that 40% to make it all work?
Yeah, and we will put this in the chat box. In the interest of time, I won't go into this too much, but we can do a little bit more of the how to calculate in the Q&A discussion. Essentially, it's just looking at breakfast and lunch meals over the course of the week and making sure that at least 40% of the total breakfast and lunch meals, which really comes down to entrees, like pizza meal, burger meal, yogurt meal, that kind of stuff, that those are going to have 40% of those will be like fitting the framework of freshly prepared meals.
Okay. Do you want to conclude there, or should we keep going?
I think I really do want to keep this to 30 minutes, so I can basically just quickly let you all know that we have some tracking reporting guidance here, but we don't have a lot of information on how the framework, like how all of this will be, like how the meal portion will be tracked. So, really what we're going to do is put this in the chat box as well. There's a resource about how to track your expenses, and then hopefully we'll understand like more soon on how your meals and your menus will be audited. We're audit people at LunchAssist, so we're all about like preparing for audits, and we do that with our clients. And the guidance that we're really giving to folks is to make sure that you're keeping whatever documentation you have on how you spent your funds and how you trained your team, and then like keeping all your menu documentation and making sure that your menus meet the 40% framework sometime during this school year. So don't wait till August to have your menus meeting the freshly prepared framework. Really, it's super important that they meet the freshly prepared framework within this school year, even if it's like just for the month of May, for example.
Okay.
Perfect. And then just like some deadlines to keep in mind that the 2021 kit funds are going to be, that report is due June 30th. So just make sure that you have that into CDE by June 30th. So you can wait till you spend funds, and then 2022 kit funds we have until June 30th, 2025 to spend.
Okay, perfect. Do we want to conclude here? Mike, do you want to close us out before we go into Q&A?
Yeah, sure. A couple of things I want to touch on really quick. Recording access. We are recording today's call, Zoom meeting. I know many of you want to know how to access today's call. For those of you who are current LunchAssist Pro members, we will be adding the entire webinar series to the LunchAssist Pro website in the training library. So there'll be a new section called LunchAssist Webinars for anyone who's not currently a LunchAssist Pro member. Obviously, we want you to become one, and then you can access that stuff there as well. If not, we will be emailing a link to the webinar recordings via the weekly newsletter, and the recordings will be available on YouTube. I also want to touch on one other thing as well. We talked about kit funds today, so real quick, want to make sure you know that LunchAssist services are allowable. You are an allowable use for kit funds. Okay, in fact, we had a number of districts recently buy multi-year membership access to LunchAssist Pro to make use of their kit funds before the deadline runs up. So if you're interested in joining, just let us know. You can email me, mike@lunchassist.org, to set up a meeting with me. So what do you get? Again, just a kind of a reminder, what do you get with your LunchAssist Pro access? You get access to our ever-growing resource library, our training videos for you and your staff, plus our professional standards tracking and reporting software. We also have add-on features like access to our Spanish video library and AR Bootcamp. You can either use kit funds or your regular cafeteria fund or on any of these, and on our one-on-one consulting services as well. So if you are interested, one thing to keep in mind, we've seen it take approximately 20 to 30 days for districts to get this approved. So with the 2021 kit fund deadline coming up in June, it might be a good idea to contact us sooner rather than later. Also want to let you know about the next chat. Again, it's going to be next Thursday, March 14th at 2 p.m. We'll be focusing on CEP and Provision 2, especially in light of the lower ISP and universal meal legislation. So thanks again for joining us. It's been great to be together. That's a wrap on our regular 30-minute call here. So feel free to hop off if you need to. Those of us that want to stick around for the live Q&A discussion, we're going to stick around for another 15 or 20 minutes or so. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Emma now.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, thanks everyone for being here. And we're going to jump right into some more questions because I know there was a lot in the chat. And we did kind of rush through the end. Apologize about that. So I wonder if we want to take it back, actually. Jen, do you want to reiterate the answer to the question about adding an 1/8 cup of fruit to a burger, but you can't add fresh veggies to a frozen pizza?
Yes, yes. So, yeah, that is actually, and I'm going to pose this out to, I know Emily and Jackie on our consulting team are here. So if y'all want to try to pull the source on that while we're doing the rest of the Q&A, it's been clear in the guidance that we've reviewed and the discussions that we've had with CDE about the frozen pizza situation, like adding veggies to frozen pizza. And I think it kind of goes back in a similar concept to the of it's like almost like it's an example of something that would disqualify a meal. So like a frozen pizza as the entree is not going to qualify. Like the whole meal would be disqualified. And of course, if there is like official guidance from them that contradicts that, please, like we're not trying to be right or anything. That's just been our understanding of it. And I know it's like someone was saying that they had been told that like verbally at industry conference, or like, so if you guys have that in writing, or if you've like, let's update this and let everyone know. But that's been our understanding as well.
Right. And to answer Kathy's question, you can use a pre-made pizza crust and then add your own homemade sauce and fresh veggies, that would count.
Yes, yes, exactly. So you can do so then that would go like tied to the framework, right? Of elevating the entree. So like your even though you've got like your pre-made, let's say you got like a pre-made dough and then you've got a pre-made sauce, but then you add cheese and you add an eighth cup of fruit or veggie to your pizza, let's say peppers or something to your pizza, then you've kind of elevated the entree and that eighth cup of fruit or veggie counts. So yeah.
And then just to kind of ask a question I had actually, which is, what about yogurt parfaits? Does the granola have to be made from scratch?
No. So this is also where like information has changed. And this is what's been this like this has made such a this is why freshly prepared meals has been such a hot topic really because it's been something that keeps the guidance keeps changing on, right? So we've basically I guess what we can do actually, Camille, since you're still sharing slides, if you want to go back to slide 37. I kind of allude to it in this email with CDE on slide 37, with that's the one with the email. So it's interesting. So the very last, I don't know if anyone caught that, but the last example here was about yogurt parfaits. Because originally, when all this guidance came out, they were saying that yogurt parfaits, you had to do homemade granola.
Mm.
And but then yogurt is considered minimally processed. So basically, they've changed their guidance on that now, and you don't have to do homemade granola because yogurt is considered minimally processed, even like by itself or with a ready-made product. So,
Right.
and especially if you're combining it with something like strawberries. So, in this last example, I was just trying to prove a point with the graham crackers by saying like yogurt parfaits with yogurt, strawberries, and graham crackers would be fine. And they're like, yes,
Right.
that would be fine for us.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And Tiffany asked in the chat, what if the graham crackers are paired with the homemade waffle? Does that make it count because it's ready-made, served with freshly prepared?
Yeah. Yeah. You don't necessarily have to sprinkle them on top. That was just kind of a ridiculous example on our end. But yeah, you could pair the graham crackers with the waffle as like a coupling, right? Like waffle plus graham cracker.
Interesting.
That would be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just if it's like a standalone side, and that's the language they use. And I'll actually put that in the chat. The language that they use on this topic is that examples of standalone processed food items that disqualify a meal from meeting the definition include.
Got it. And Sally asked in the chat, how about assembled chef salads?
Yeah, so assembled chef salads would be a perfect example of a freshly prepared meal. And if you think about it, you can really take it back to if we go back to like two slides forward, Camille, on slide 39. Um, it's really following this framework because it's not a commercially prepared combination entree, right? It's not like it would need to be like in-house. I don't think you could do this with like a chef salad that was brought in from a company. But if you made a chef salad and put it in a clamshell, um, you would be elevating your entree because it would have at least an eighth cup of fruit or veggie in it.
Got it.
So even if your grain was croutons and your protein was, your meat that's not cooked from raw, and cheese, it would be fine because it's got at least an eighth cup of fruit or veggie in it. So it's a freshly prepared meal. So
Got it.
that's where the magic wand is kind of a joke, but like we've been joking about it. We're like, oh, we just put our fruit and veggie wand or our salsa wand on things because that's one of the best ways. Like as long as it's not like a commercially prepared combination entree, then
Mhm.
we can add fruits and veggies, and that's great. If that's the result of this legislation is less processed packaged, individually wrapped kind of entrees and more veggies and entrees, and that's great.
Right. And just to reiterate,